A big part of being an outdoor leader is being able to identify those potential environmental impacts and be able to do whatever you can to alleviate them. This obviously depends on one, the activity, and two, the environmental setting that you're in. In a place like this, where we're on a slope, we're on a mountain, and we have a river running behind us, there's lots of opportunities here for us to have an impact in this sort of environment. In order to gauge that impact, we need to have some understanding of the environment around us. Alpine areas are more sensitive to environmental impact because of the harsh conditions that impact them. High amounts of wind, rain, snow, they don't recover as well after impact has occurred either. The plants are more hardy, however, they are lower to the ground and more easily trodden on. And this can be a real problem in alpine areas, particularly as they are so slow to regenerate. Now, somewhere like here, which is a forested area, it is more protected, but because of the slope, you're more likely to get an erosion effect from any impact you have. So if we're near the beach, once again, we need to be careful because anything that you occur, leave behind, damage you make, might be exacerbated by the ocean's waves. And any waste you leave can be washed out into the ocean. So in another place like this is a popular area on Mount Wellington for downhill mountain bike riding. Certainly on a normal bushwalking track, people's footprints do leave an impact. However, they're often not as bad as, say, a high-speed mountain bike, particularly when you're looking at the braking of the bike. As it goes down, takes hard turns, it does dig the dirt away. And so mountain biking may have a larger impact than, say, bushwalking or hiking. The other restriction we have then is what are the cultural impacts that we can have? Are there culturally relevant sites nearby that we need to be sensitive to, that people wouldn't want to have worn down or eroded away or ridden over because it's considered disrespectful for that location? There's a range of other things. Here we're looking at walking, but even where you park your car. So transport's an issue. Are the car sites hardened? Is they concreted? Is it tarmacked? Is it appropriate management for large buses? Or can it handle 100 people a day or 100 cars a day? So one way of managing the impact is choosing your location appropriately for your activity. Some locations, like this one, because of the slope, might be more sensitive than a flat area that has predominantly stones or actually has been hardened with either wood, concrete, tarmac for your bike ride, particularly if you're leading large groups every day. Something that can make an environment fragile is the presence of water. Okay, we need to be careful about contaminating water, and we also need to be careful of how long it takes perhaps for the plants to regrow or how easily habitat is damaged. Even something as simple as human waste can contaminate a river, not to mention the things people might drop in it, or the effect of car oil runoff from a car park. So all those things need to be considered, and water is a highly sensitive feature that can be easily either silted, which is simply if you disturb an area, you can have an element of soil run off that disturbed area and into the water system. Now, therefore, this soil will become a small suspended solid in the river, and this can be enough to choke, suffocate, and smother all sorts of invertebrate life that might be in the river. It can make any wildlife or marine life that might be coming upstream from the ocean, it can have an effect there. And a lot of sediment loading can definitely have an effect at the mouth of a river. So we want to avoid these sorts of impacts. So even just disturbing the soil can lead to increased runoff if there's a water system nearby. So if the environment is really fragile, because the plants there are not very resilient and the habitat is easily disturbed and the animals might be scared away, you want to be extra careful with the activities you choose. Perhaps you could choose a different activity for that location, something quieter, maybe do a bushwalk with limited numbers rather than a bike ride with 20 people. Maybe you would adjust your client type from a number of high school kids to perhaps a more elderly quiet walk. So you might change how you sell that activity and you would pitch it differently. Another thing to consider is the presence or absence of threatened species. A threatened species is basically a species that is categorized as having its population either reduced or impacted upon by human activities over the years. We have several categories of threatened species. They can be endangered, rare, vulnerable, extinct in the wild. There's a range of categories. It's worth being aware if there are any threatened species in your area, and it's often well publicised because that's something Parks and Wildlife or the local council want people to be aware of. It is worth looking up to see what they are, where they live, and when they exist. If they're an animal, you might want to avoid those times or seasons that they are present, because although it would be great to see one, it's actually going to be really unfortunate if you happen to disturb them or disturb their breeding season and therefore somehow affect their population. A good example of this might be fairy penguins when they are breeding, and you don't necessarily want to take dogs in the area or any other shoreline birds, because barking dogs can scare them, might try and eat them, or certainly move the parents away from their young that need care. So perhaps we would, once again, not take our dogs on that activity. Perhaps we could still go during the day, and if you go at night, you want reduced numbers, people to be quiet, and often what you find is if they're using torches, they'll use some red cellophane or a red torch so that the white light doesn't disturb the animals as much, particularly as they come in from the ocean and move to their nests. You'll find some of the basic features of ecological systems are consistent as you go from system to system. They consist of basically shelter, water, soil, the animals that are present, the types of plants that are present. Basically, how high those plants be. Are they trees, tall forests, or are they low shrubs? What type of environment are you in? Are you close to the equator where it's warm? Or are you further south or north where the temperatures are much more temperate and cooler? And those sorts of things will govern the trees that are there, how often snow is present for throughout the year. So you have all these different features that can occur in an ecosystem. However, you're consistently going to be looking at what's occurring here, why am I here, what does the group want to see, and what do we need to be careful of. If they're low shrubs, you want to make sure people just aren't treading on them. Okay, we want to actually try and pick a well-used path so we're not spreading our impact out. Sometimes there are cases where you do try to spread your impact out, but more often than not, you're going to be sticking to a hardened path, and it's been hardened usually by Parks and Wildlife or a local council so that it can take a lot of people. We want to avoid situations where we're doing constant damage, spreading the path out, or making the path deeper and deeper and deeper. If that's the case, you would want to let someone know that the path has deteriorated and needs what we call hardening. Okay, because one way of managing environmental impact is to harden an area so it can accept more tourists or more people coming to visit it. One way we want to try and prevent environmental impacts in our area is to educate our clients before we come out. A good briefing will cover key features that they want to see, and also there'll be key features that we need to be careful of or considerate of. These might be things like Aboriginal middens or historic European sites or the threatened species we know that exist there. Particular parts of the track might be extra sensitive, and we want to tell the clients about those as we brief them at the beginning of the trip. Then when we get to those locations, we will be reminding the clients rather than just having it be a surprise that they need to be careful. Sometimes people get excited and they race ahead and they want to see something they've seen in the distance and inadvertently trample through a patch of threatened plant species that were there, or run straight over a midden pile which they should have avoided. There are several ways the local authorities can border off areas that they want protected. It can simply be through signage asking people to stick to the track. It can be through posts that are laid out for areas that usually are under rehabilitation, or you simply don't want people going because they're a sensitive area, either culturally or environmentally. And this is a common thing to see. And when you see them, it is worth pointing out to your clients that you're taking on their outdoor recreation activity that they're not to impact upon those areas. And it's worth telling them at the beginning of the trip when you do the briefing.